the United Tribes flag was chosen by Rangatira. 3, I believe, was selected, and they chose this one. It had a white background, red St. George cross, which is also known as the flag of England. St. George had a Hebrew mum and a Greek dad. He wasn't British, but he did die for the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I think in Rangatira back then, Christianity had come to New Zealand. It had come to many countries, and it had zoomed through the countries. It zoomed into African continent and zoomed up into Europe. My ancestors would have been Druids and Wiccans, and Christianity got through into England and into Scotland. So Christianity was a liberating faith because it didn't destroy culture. It allowed culture to remain, but it smoothed culture. It took utu out, and it took warring out, and people lived in peace. So the Rangatira were Christians, so it doesn't surprise me that they actually chose a St. George cross on their flag. And up in the top quadrant, another little St. George cross, and then blue at the background with the white 8-pointed stars. I've been told that that's for the 8 waka that first arrived in New Zealand. I've heard another version of it, but this one was told to me recently by a Māori girl. And also this flag has a black primray, which I'll show you in a later photograph. You can just see the little border around the little St. George cross there. And that's black because that's the law of the land. That's not law of the sea, it's not international law. That is common law, or Māori native law, customary, New Zealand customary law, which is Māori law. And that's very significant for us, and I'll talk about that. So there it is. So, goodness, what happened? Well, wouldn't you know it? There was a company that was created in the early 1800s, and it was called the New Zealand Company. And they were chartered by the time 1841 came, but they were well about their work beforehand. And I thought, well, where did they come from? What was that all about? Well, it doesn't take you too much digging. This is Wikipedia, an unreliable source, but if they give you a bit of information, it's what they will confess to that's interesting. And you'll see here that the New Zealand Company was formed in London, headed by the wealthy John George Lambton, Whig MP, Venetian. And the directors of the company were East India Company merchants. So the New Zealand Company was really, came out of the defunct East India British Trading Company that had destroyed India and had destroyed China and other countries, by the way. They got into America. We know the Boston Tea Party. That's East India Trading Company. So here it is. So it's interesting to me that the Venetians, the Jesuits, were able to wiggle themselves in to New Zealand very early. Now, the New Zealand Company, you know what I said, they always, nothing to see here, people, and they adopted the He Wakaputanga flag. They'd really just slip it over us, nothing to see here. We're just part of the people, not doing anything wrong, and that is what they created with 6 stars for theirs. Now, there's another interesting thing about the New Zealand Company. Wakefield was well into the problems of New Zealand. I haven't read this, my husband Reese has. This is The Great Divide by Ian Wishart. He's an investigative journalist, and he talks not so much about He Wakaputanga, but he talks about the New Zealand Company, he talks about the Wakefields, and he talks about the Māori wars, land wars, and he talks about Treaty of Waitangi. So he goes back to original documents, so it might be an interesting read. But you'll notice here the New Zealand Company wound up all remaining business with a final report in 1858. So did they disappear? I doubt it. But the very same year, a shipping company known as Shaw, Saville and Company adopted the He Wakaputanga flag as their house flag, 1858. And this is what the elites do all the time. They rebrand themselves. They rebrand themselves, so you never find the genesis of the evil and everything looks all right. But the Shaw Saville Company put out this postcard, and clearly it's a strong postcard, and it's a postcard of the 1835, 28th of October, signing of the He Wakaputanga Declaration. You'll see HMS Alligator out on the bay. It gave a 21-gun salute. Now, every year at Waitangi, on the 6th of February, we get a 21-gun salute. But that isn't to commemorate Waitangi. That isn't to commemorate the flag we think is ours. It's to commemorate the United Tribes flag to this day. We're just not told. I just want to read you something here. Adern was up in Waitangi in 2018, and this is what she said. I can't help think of the kinds of things I'd want my child to think about as they come onto these grounds and to this place. My hope is that they know this place's history. She says that they know of the 28th of October and the Declaration of Independence. So she said that to Māori that was sitting in front of her in 2018. Yet we hear nothing. So she basically just patted them all on the head, really, made them feel as if she hadn't forgotten it and will do something about that someday. She will never do anything about it. It's all just lip service. But our flag that we have flying today, we're one of the only countries, particularly in the West, that doesn't have a flag raising day. Because if we had a flag raising day, there'd be questions. Why are we raising that flag? It's not our flag. The New Zealand company. Again, this is what the elites do. The New Zealand company brought immigration to New Zealand in the droves. Now, my father's great grandfather came over from Northern Ireland on one of these ships, and he was a good guy. I've just put my hand up for him there. But that's not the point. Many people are great. The point is, if you're going to do mass immigration, you destroy culture. That's what we're seeing now in Europe. That's what we're seeing in Britain with the elites allowing mass immigration from North Africa. And it's to destroy culture. And that's really what they started doing right back then in the 1800s. It was the New Zealand company that fomented most of the land wars. They caused the problem that made Māori have to fight back. And this is part of what we know as a Hegelian dialectic. Some of you may know that, where they cause the stress and then you get a swing this way and then you get what they want. So thesis is Māori rangatira, tangata whenua, sovereign and independent. We can't have that. How can we own and control that? Cause the problems, we swing over here and have Māori wars, and then we need to, so that's thesis, this is antithesis, and then we get synthesis. The synthesis is what the elites want, and that's exactly what we got by the time we get to 1840 with the Treaty of Waitangi. That treaty was assigning to end hostilities. That's all that treaty was for. It sat on the He Wakaputanga Declaration. Māori did not cede sovereignty or independence, but that whole nefarious business was to hijack New Zealand. And to make things worse, that's when our flag started getting traded out. The He Wakaputanga flag there with the black primbrae was flying at the upper marae in Waitangi, at the lower marae in Waitangi. Just before the Treaty of Waitangi, the bottom marae, the United Tribes flag was taken down, and this counterfeit was put in. You can see the white primbrae. That's international law, law of the sea. This one up here is the true He Wakaputanga flag, is the only flag of this status that's not owned by the globalists, by the banksters. It's the land-sea flag. This next one down is a sea flag. Okay, so that was put in the lower marae. So on the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, the lower marae flag, the counterfeit, was lowered and the Union Jack went up. At the upper marae, to this day, the He Wakaputanga flag, the United Tribes flag, has never been lowered. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily the original flag, it probably rotted away, but it hasn't been ceremonially lowered. It's no longer in use in a new flag. It's still flying. So this then was traded for the flag we know in 1902. And that's why we don't have a flag raising day. We were hobbled, hijacked. The Jesuits got us, I'm sorry to say. And that's where we find ourselves today. Just to emphasize that, I'm just going through this really quickly. Above the orange line is when the postal service was in Māori hands. Then it was quietly and sneakily stolen from them, really. Let's call a spade, and it went into state ownership hands. And down here, the New Zealand Post Office, Post Bank, and then it was sold by the government as a state-owned enterprise to the ANZ Bank. They stole it, then they sold it. Here's another example too of the railways, of the native couriers, native shipping, native transport. Above the orange line, owned by Māori. Under the orange line, stolen by what's really then known as the settlers' government, which is basically what we've got now. Māori didn't need a government. They were self-governing, independent, and sovereign. But there were problems mainly with the whalers and the sealers and the traders. And out of New South Wales, we got a settlers' government. That was for non-Māori. It wasn't for Māori. It was for the settlers. And that's really rebranded as who we've got now down in Wellington. But you can see the same thing here. Railways sold, not the land, because Māori own the land. They own the land that the beehive's on too, by the way. Stolen. Now, you'll see here this Union Steamship Company, and there's that Shore Savile again, but P&O lines, always changing names all the time. You can see the whole way through. Just change. That way you don't notice it's been stolen, you see. Just rebrand it. Union Steamship Company was given or gifted colours of the Haast Eagle by Māori so that they could come into New Zealand waters and safely and do their trading. And today, it became P&O, and today those same colours are still flown by P&O. Those colours, the Haast Eagle colours of gold, red, white and blue, gifted by Māori, and it comes from the eagle, extinct now, but it was supposed to, reported to have a 22-foot to 32-foot wingspan. So that's how it's done, people. That's how it's done. Did it to New Zealand, but they're well practiced. Other countries were well gone way before us. We were just the next boy on the block to be, punched out. So what does it look like in New Zealand? Well, it looks like we're totally owned and controlled. This was put there in early 1900s and I think was formalized in the 1940s. Logan Campbell, in his memoirs, or in his writings rather, said that this was a memorial to Māori. Now just think about that for a minute. Okay? So you don't need a memorial if people are still around, do you? Just a memorial when they're gone, when they're dead. So that meant they either weren't expecting Māori to survive or they were going to do away with Māori. Who would know? The other thing with this obelisk is it has a man-made water line around its base. And that is a symbol to the elite, letting everyone know New Zealand or New Zealanders, Māori, non-Māori, are all lost at sea. We're dead. We're corporations. And that's what our birth certificate does. Our birth certificate is actually our death certificate. That's why you only get a copy. You never get the original because you're no longer alive. So that's just your birth certificate, like a ship birthed. You're dead, you're a corporation. And that's how this government down in Wellington can deal with us as individuals, as dead beings. So I'll talk about that in a minute as well. Bono from U2, he had his photographs up there a few decades ago. He wrote a song about One Tree Hill. He has the same, it's called a bent cross. It bows over the top with a emaciated looking Jesus on it, which is an ancient mystery, satanic symbol that Pope John Paul was the first guy, I think, to bring that in. Each pope since then still has it on his staff, this bent cross, and there's plenty of writings telling us of its ancient origins. Bono spends plenty of time at the Vatican as well. So all the elites, they get it, you know, they understand. It's just we, the people, that have been lied to. So this is Treaty of Waitangi, owned and controlled. Got nothing to do with New Zealand culture. These need to be removed. So just quickly now, we're up here into 1986, when in the Palmer government there was another enormous and near successful coup to destroy He Wakaputanga forever. And that was in the middle of the night. They traded out the flesh and blood monarchy, Queen Elizabeth, for what's known as Her Majesty the Queen and Right of New Zealand. It's a nothing burger. It's just a mixture of words. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Because with the He Wakaputanga Declaration, it was rangatira and flesh and blood monarchy, well, his man on the spot, James Busby, that signed in wet ink signature. So this was a contract between flesh and blood and flesh and blood. And that contract said that if we had an enemy or a problem here in New Zealand, that the flesh and blood monarchy of England would send navy, whatever, to save us. Now, we have tried to get letters out there through our Governor-General saying, hey, we need help. We have a runaway government. We need help. But of course, they're not getting there. But in 1986, that was to really make sure we could never reach back over to Britain. Because, as I say, they traded out the flesh and blood queen for a sentence. Her Majesty, the Queen and Right of New Zealand. What is that? So there's this guy, Alistair. I've seen him on a video, and this is where I got this from. And he contacted Greg Bowen in December 2020. He was the secretary for the Governor-General, Patsy, who's now Cindy, that I can't remember her surname, that's there, and questioned Gregory. And Gregory said, yes, that, well, the Crown of England hasn't been here for the last generation. So Alistair is saying, well, are you saying that the partner, the 50-50 partner, that the English Crown is no longer here? Have they vacated? And Gregory Bowen said, yep, that's right, gone. So we're left without any help from England, gone, because of this nefarious business, this coup in 1986. And as you can see there, Gregory Bowen said it is held by the Queen of New Zealand. Well, there is no Queen of New Zealand. That's Her Majesty, the Queen and Right of New Zealand. It's a sentence, that's all. It's a nothing. Now, there was a Māori, Hohepa, he was a lawyer, he was the House of Lords in Britain. He found out that that coup in 1986 had taken place, and he came back over to work on and push through this Te Ture Whenua Māori Act of 1993. And it clawed back some of what that coup in 1986 destroyed. And this is a very important document because it puts He Wakaputanga back on the map. Now, when in the 1800s, when He Wakaputanga Declaration was signed, William IV documentation in his books, there is a Halsbury statute books, and it says in that New Zealand Parliament cannot derogate from the sovereign supremacy of England, and England cannot derogate from the sovereign supremacy of the Māori nation assembled in Parliament at Waitangi. So that means Britain cannot steal anything away from the Māori nation in the Parliament that meets in Waitangi. It goes on to say that no further government, no further later Parliament can take away what has been established already. A Parliament cannot derogate from its forefathers' legislation. So that should anchor us well. There are many documents, I'm only showing you a few tonight, but there are many, many documents around that keeps us safe and He Wakaputanga safe. We just need to access it and claim it, really. Now, the other interesting thing, remember I said Māori didn't need a government given to them, they were already governing, but the settlers were given a settlers government. Well, that was all too much for the elite because there were two baskets of deplorables. There were Māori and non-Māori. So what they decided to do is let's put all the, there's a Hillary Clinton, she talked about her basket of deplorables that voted for Trump, anyone that wasn't a Marxist. So they decided in 1858 to put these two baskets of deplorables into one basket. And they did that through this act, which is the New Zealand Districts Regulation Act. And it says here, half castes and other persons of mixed race living as members of any native tribe and all Aboriginal natives of any of the islands in the Pacific Ocean shall for the purpose of this act be deemed to be persons of the native race. So it begs the question legally whether as non-Māori we can just step over here and say thank you very much. This settlers government down in Wellington has got nothing to do with us. We are native legally. And what the whole coup in 1986 was trying to jettison was the Constitution Act of 1852, which is still valid, by the way. And it says, whereas it may be expected that the law, customs and usage of the Aboriginal or native inhabitants of New Zealand, so far as they are not repugnant to general principles of humanity, should for the present be maintained for the government of themselves in all their relations to and dealings with each other, and that particular district should set out a part within which laws, customs or usages should be so observed. So, meaning that Māori were governing themselves. Okay, so who do we have down there in Wellington? Well, we have a private corporation in Wellington, and it's known as the New Zealand Government. You can see here New Zealand Government with a nice swish underneath the New Zealand Government. I might as well be selling cookies at the bottom of my drive and using that as my logo. It means nothing. Yes, it says New Zealand Government, but it's just a logo. Because the New Zealand Government, well, we haven't got government. We have someone that's governing, and that is a corporation. And this corporation is the New Zealand Government, a United States Security and Exchange Commission registered corporation. It's a corporation. It's owned by America. And you can see down the bottom, Her Majesty, the Queen and Right of New Zealand, again, all handily put into capitals because it's a nothing burger. And there's the number. You can duck, go that, and you'll be able to find that yourself. There are documents that tell us, like the Clearfield Doctrine that came out in 2008, that a corporation cannot govern. It's illegal for a corporation to govern, yet we have a corporation governing. It's also that this corporation must always have a contract with its people before it asks its people to do anything, like take the poison needle. So the bottom line here in New Zealand is we're no longer a rule of law, we've no longer got a democracy, we now are in a dictatorship. We're in a global tyranny, lockstep with other nations, and we're all around the world fighting for our existence and our freedom. So we are in a very serious state. And that's the reason I wanted to go back in history for you. This isn't something that's just turned up and we can turn this over. They've been about this work for millennia, and particularly since World War II. I could give you many documentation, references, and quotes to explain exactly what they've been doing, particularly 1960s onwards. So we have a corporation, and New Zealand isn't their jurisdiction. Their jurisdiction is in the Ross dependency, and you'll be able to DuckDuckGo this as well. The Ross dependency is owned by America. It's actually part of the Antarctic there. And that's where Adern, Luxon, the lot, that's their jurisdiction. And I think orange boiler suits for the lot of them, and we'll ship them down.
That's what we're intending to do down in Wellington now. The whole bloody lot.
The whole gone. Got to be gone. Yeah. Yep. And we do not leave Wellington. I would be down there, but I'm busy doing this, so people understand. It's about the first protest I haven't been to in the last two years, but I know what I've got to do, and I'm staying in my little slot as much as my friends are all down there. Okay, so here's where I want to take you here. At the beginning of last year, I put in my affidavit of truth. It wasn't rebutted, became an affidavit of fact. The government know that I am a flesh and blood being, and I'm no longer a corporation lost at sea through my birth certificate. But this stands on the Magna Carta, and that is common law. Now, this is what I want to explain to you. I love common law. It's kind of helping us to a certain degree. But the problem with common law is it's the law of the land in Britain. The law of the land in New Zealand is Maori customary law, He Wakaputanga. So common law, yes, it does kind of come over a little bit, because common law and Maori customary law are both laws that sit on the law of God, giving us our individual inalienable rights. End of story. But common law isn't getting the traction in our courts here in New Zealand that it once did get, because the game's up. The swamp know we're playing the game now. This has been an enormous explosion of people understanding common law. But the thing with common law is you can learn and dig into it for 10, 20, 30 years, and you're still not at the bottom of it. That is the problem. Because they've got Black's Law Dictionary, and they just bring out another edition. They own the keys to everything. And this is our problem. We will fight them and never win. The evil John Locke said, we will run the world like a casino, and the house always wins. We cannot win in their jurisdiction. And this affidavit, and sitting on the Magna Carta, is trying to win in their jurisdiction. We've got to start forcing ourselves and our jurisdiction into the public domain. And that jurisdiction is He Wakaputanga. New Tirini is what we were known back. It's way back in the day in the 1800s. It's a French word, new territory, Aotearoa New Tirini. Because I just want to go back to Martin Luther and we the people 500 years ago that took us out of a 1,000-year tyranny. And what made the difference? Because other people had tried over those hundreds of years and couldn't get out. But this made the difference? Here's Martin Luther, he's before the king. We've got the prelates and the bishops from the papacy there. We the people are outside. This is his last time he's coming before the court. He's been told to recant. Basically, that means say now you believe that the papacy is the only source of truth, and we'll let you go. That's what he was asked to do. Say now that our narrative is correct, and we'll let you go. It's a bit like now, isn't it? You're not allowed to work. We're not going to let you go there. Oh, the rates you pay to use the local swimming pool in the library? Not for you anymore. You do this. You recant, and then we'll allow you. There's no freedom there, by the way. There would have been no freedom for him. There was no freedom for anyone. But what made the difference that day with the scaffolders ready to burn him, there was been no stand-down time. He would have been taken straight out, and the flames would have been lit. Is you'll see the princes there, and they governed different regions of Germany. And for the first time, they stood with Martin Luther and said to the papacy and the king, you kill Martin Luther, you kill us. And like that, 1,000-year dark ages ended. We need. I can stand in my own mana, my own sovereignty, but they'll come for me. And when they put a gun in my face or bash down my front door and haul me out, what am I going to do? Nothing. I can't do anything. If I stay in my hapu or in my community, what can we do? They can come and ransack our community gardens. They can still round us up. They did that in Germany. They did that in Russia. Sent millions to the gulag. They did that in communist China as well. So it is our inalienable rights under God that's at stake here. And I think I've explained today that we're not just in a physical battle, but we're in a spiritual battle. The elites are Luciferians. They're Satanists. That's why transgender is big for them. It's all part of Luciferian belief. Why they're happy to abort our babies, and baby parts are worth millions of dollars, well, hundreds of thousands of dollars individually, but as an industry. And we need to push as if everything relied on us, but pray like everything relied on God, because they are fighting at a spiritual and a physical level, and we must do so too. Because this is jurisdiction. We're going to step out of the corporation jurisdiction, and we're going to step into He Wakaputanga jurisdiction. Two different jurisdictions. You fly your He Wakaputanga flag, because jurisdiction is portable, and a flag heralds jurisdiction.